نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. Whoever has reverence or shows reverence for the sha'air of Allah. What are the sha'air of Allah? They are those things that are symbolic of Allah's obedience. Imam Fakhruddin Razi rahmatullah alayhi says, كُلُّ مَا كَانَ عَلَمًا مِنْ أَعْلَامِ طَاعَةِ اللَّهِ فَهُوَ مِنْ شَعَائِرِهِ. Anything that is symbolic of the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is from the sha'air of Allah. So what will happen to someone who has reverence for the sha'air of Allah? فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. This is a part of taqwa. So a person's taqwa will require from them that they have ta'zeem, they have reverence, they have very high regard, and therefore a very respectful dealing with all of those things that are symbolic of the obedience of Allah. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives some examples of sha'air in the Quran to give us an idea. Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah. Safa and Marwa are from the sha'air. Why? These are symbols of Hajj, and Hajj is one of the great ibadat of Islam. Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu la tuhillu sha'air Allah wala shahr al-haram wala al-hadya wala al-qala'id wala amin al-bayt al-haram. Don't desecrate, do not undermine the importance of the sha'air of Allah. And amongst them are the sacred months, the 4 sacred months, the animals that have been designated to be slaughtered at Hajj, the animals that are being taken from outside of the haram, they are being taken by the Hujjaj for slaughtering along with them. Those people that themselves are going to Baytullah for Hajj, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not undermine their importance, do not violate them. So here in Surah Al-Hajj, whoever observes reverence, shows reverence to the sha'air of Allah, this is part of taqwa. So it leads us to start reflecting on which sha'air of Allah do we see around us that we need to show reverence to. So the masajid, for example, are from the sha'air of Allah. And all of those things that are related to worships are from the sha'air of Allah. All of those things that we do that are indicative or are representative of Allah's obedience, these are also from the sha'air of Allah. Showing regard for them means that we do not treat them lightly. We do not consider them to be insignificant. We do not consider them to be unimportant. So when that happens, we will deal with those things very, very carefully and very respectfully. So we will deal with the masajid. In fact, when we look at the masjid, we will look at it with an eye of reverence, with an eye of ta'zeem. The word ta'zeem is used in the Quran. Ta'zeem. And ta'zeem is for azama. Just like takbir means to pronounce the greatness of something, to pronounce the greatness, we say Allahu Akbar. Allah is the greatest. So ta'zeem has a similar meaning. To say that this is something very great. It's something very high, very noble. So, our lives are filled with many things that are from the sha'air of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'll give you a few examples. The Mus'haf, the Quran, the printed copy of the Quran. Is this representative of the obedience of Allah? Absolutely. Is this representative of Allah Azza wa Jal Himself and His deen? Absolutely. So therefore this Mus'haf now is from the sha'air of Allah. We need to deal with it with reverence. So somebody who deals with this Mus'haf, and I'm using this as an example, somebody who wants to treat this Mus'haf with ta'zeem is not going to put it on the floor. They're not going to hold it with their left hand. They're not going to put it in a place that's dirty. They're not going to point their feet towards it. They're not going to do any of those things. Why? It's from the sha'air of Allah. The Qibla, the Kaaba is from the sha'air of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why in our Islamic etiquette, we have been taught, don't point your feet towards the Qibla. Why? This is from the greatest sha'air of Allah. This is the direction that we face when we pray. This is the direction we face when we prostrate. So we will not point our feet in that direction. The Islamic appearance is also from the sha'air of Allah. Somebody who is adopting the appearance of obedient slaves of Allah, that appearance is also from the sha'air. It's from the sha'air of Islam, it's from the sha'air of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The appearance itself is not something to be undermined. If animals, those animals, وَالْبُدْنَ جَعَلْنَاهَا مِنْ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ, Allah says, those animals that are going to be slaughtered, these are from the sha'air of Allah. What do you think about those people that are representing His deen? Will they not be from the sha'air of Allah? So this head covering, this beard, the libas, even though the libas of Muslims will vary, but it will always have things in common. It will always be long and loose and filled with modesty. This is from the sha'air of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Pious Muslims all over the world always have covered their heads. Always have. There is no difference of opinion in this, that covering the head is from the adab of salat, is from the adab of Islam. In fact, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu used to say that I don't even use the washroom without covering my head. So what is this? This is not from the sha'air. When you see someone with a topi, with a sunnah cap, what do you say? You know they're not a Hindu, they're not a Christian, they're not a Sikh. You know that this is a Muslim. Because this thing is now a symbol. It has become a symbol of deen. Now you can sit there and debate about how important it is, how necessary it is, how crucial it is. It doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. This thing always has been symbolic of a Muslim and symbolic of Islam. So treat it with respect. And when you see someone wearing it, look at them with an eye of respect. Maybe I'm not able to follow that, but at least this person has the courage to do this, and by doing so, they're not just doing this as a personal act, they are out there being symbolic of our Islam. Somebody who has an Islamic appearance, we should look at them with an eye of reverence. Why? Because they are representing what an Islamic appearance looks like. Maybe I can't do that myself, but I should definitely look at it with an eye of appreciation, with an eye of honor, with an eye of respect. What does shaitan pull us towards? He says, oh, it doesn't really matter what you look like, it's what's inside that counts. It's true, it's what's inside that really counts. But what we do on the outside is also a amal. This is also an act, it's a deed. Praying salat is something that somebody is doing from the outside. We don't know what's happening inside their heart. But if they're praying, we will say, yes, this person is practicing. Hajj is a physical act, but a lot of it has to do with the inside. We don't know what people are doing inside. But from outside they're performing Hajj, we'll say, yes, mashallah, they're performing Hajj. So it's not just about inside. The hadith says, وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَىٰ قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ. Allah is not just looking at the hearts. He is looking at the hearts, and He's also looking at the acts, the deeds that we are doing. And a person who is setting a good example for others, he gets the reward of all of those that follow their example. A person who sets a bad example for others, they get the sin for all of those who follow that example. One of the tragedies that has occurred with us is we have become embroiled in these little side debates. How important is that? Which hadith is that mentioned in? How strong is that hadith? We cannot escape the framework given to us by the hadith of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Everyone is bound by that. Everyone who calls himself a Muslim is bound by that. But what we have done is we have not looked at all the hadith, we've taken a few and we've made that our deen. So somebody who studied half a book or a quarter of a book or one chapter thinks they know everything there is to know about that aspect of deen, even though they don't know half of it. They don't know a quarter of it, they don't know a tenth of it. About every single aspect of deen, there are hundreds and hundreds of ahadith. Until you go through them, you cannot decide what to do and what not to do. That's why the norms that have been established by the ummah, and the hadith says that which all the Muslims collectively see as good, it is also good in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are norms that have been set. There's no need to recreate the wheel. Now some people, they throw a wrench into all of this and they say, oh no, there's a lot of cultural stuff in there. There's a lot of cultural stuff. Yes, there is a lot of cultural stuff. But there are things that Muslims have been doing because they're Muslims, not because they are the residents of such and such continent or country. And you will see these commonalities all across the Muslim world. There is no place in the world, for example, there is no place in the world where Muslims reside, where all of them have agreed that we should not cover our heads. There is no such place. So then, is covering the head a cultural thing? It is not a cultural thing. This is found wherever Muslims are found. Wearing a long and loose libas is something that you will find in the practicing Muslims of China, in the practicing Muslims of Africa, in the practicing Muslims of Malaysia, Indonesia. You'll find that in the practicing Muslims of any part of the world that you go to. So what is this? This is symbolic of Islam. We have used this argument of culture and we've demonized culture. No, culture is the flavor that will be given to that practice of Islam. And it will always be diverse, it will always vary. And sometimes, I'll tell you something, sometimes culture is a beautiful thing. Not all culture is to be shunned. Not all cultural practices are bad. In fact, a lot of the Islam that was preserved in many parts of the world was preserved because of the culture as well. The culture actually helped support and assist the preservation of Islam. And I can talk about this for a long time. There are cultures that have haya. Naturally they have haya. And that helped back up, support, push from behind Islamic values and morals. Recently somebody was asking me that, when women hear the adhan, many times in homes, in our countries, what do? They cover their heads. Now, is this mentioned in Quran somewhere? Or is it mentioned in hadith somewhere? No. But what is it? This is a reflection of ta'zeem. Adhan is from the sha'air of Islam. It's from the sha'air of Allah. This is their way of showing ta'zeem. That no, I should cover my awrah. The head is part of the awrah of the woman. I should cover my awrah while the adhan is being called, out of reverence for these words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that are being taken out loud. It's a reverence. So maybe it's a cultural thing, but is it all bad? It's not all bad. Culture only becomes a problem when we use it to overrule Islamic ethics, values, morals, or commandments. That's when we say, no, wait a minute, this culture now is something, an example of bad culture is what we do in our weddings. Okay? That's an example of bad culture, but we don't want to let go of that. We say, no, back home, this is how we do it. Well, yes, but then tell me then where did all your rasam of Mehndi and all of this expenditures and all of these one celebration after another where did all this come from? You don't want to let go of that. That's how we do it back home. And there you're breaking so many commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so many sunnahs of Nabi sallallahu, it doesn't matter. But when it comes to things that we really should be doing, no, that's a cultural thing. In fact, I have been to high schools, public high schools, invited to public high schools to speak about Islam. And in those classes, they were Muslims as well. And so I get asked questions. So what does Islam say about the hijab? Is it necessary? Yes, it's necessary. Yeah, but we have this Muslim classmate who says it's a cultural thing. It has nothing to do with the religion. So whatever we want to shed, we'll find some label, some excuse, something to just, it's not important anymore. Or maybe it used to be important. Or it's important in that part of the world. It was important in that time. I would say hijab today is one of the greatest sha'air of Islam. A woman who has the courage to wear hijab, or even further, a woman who has the courage to wear niqab, she's out there representing us. She's out there representing Ummahatul Mu'mineen, the wives of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We should look at these people with an eye of respect. Instead of looking down at them and saying, oh, they probably don't practice, it's just a cover-up, who knows what they're doing inside. Instead of looking at it from that perspective, these are all symbols, and this symbolism is important. Don't you see what people are doing in the world to preserve their symbols? Look at the religions of the world, and those religions' identities have remained and lasted in the world because they guarded those symbols with their very lives. So learn from these people. Instead of getting into these arguments and trying to undermine and trying to shed and trying to get rid of stuff from Islam, let's take the whole package and let's revive it as it has always been practiced. So these are some things that this verse is asking us to do. Somebody asked me that, you people from that part of the world, we find that your children have a certain way of behaving. And we find that you're more respectful than our children that are in another part of the world. I said, I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily the case. We have some very, very naughty children as well. He said, no, I noticed that they are a little bit more respectful. I said, if you think that's what it is, then there's only one ingredient, and that is ta'zeem. In our culture, we have ta'zeem of elders, of parents, of Quran, of deen, of salat. It's not all walking around with a sense of entitlement that I am who I am, and this is what I deserve, this is what I need it right now. No, there is a way that we approach elders, there's a way that we approach things pertaining to religion. So that ta'zeem is a necessary ingredient. And ta'zeem always leads to adab. Ta'zeem leads to adab. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu used to sit in front of the Quran and he would cry. He would say, how can I read this? Hada kalamu Rabbi. And he would sit there repeating it over and over again, unable to read, overwhelmed with the fact that these are the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ta'zeem. Ta'zeem leads to adab. It leads to a respectful dealing with that thing, whatever it may be. And adab is so important. Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahmatullahi alayhi says that a person who does not care about adab, man tahawana bil adab uqiba bihirman as-sunnah. A person who does not behave diligently with adab and etiquette, the next step is they will start losing out on sunnahs. And then that will take them to a point where sunnahs are also not, oh yes, that's when you hear these words. It's only a sunnah. A Muslim would never ever say something like that. You could not hear this from a Muslim. It's only. There is no only a sunnah. It's the sunnah of the Habib of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing bigger than that. You would not hear Muslims saying these kinds of things. But what happened when we started shedding the adab for some excuse or another? Then shaitan had access to our sunnahs, and then we started deleting and diluting and removing sunnahs from our lives. And he says the next step after, once you start compromising the sunnah, that's another wall that's been broken. Now shaitan has access to your wajibat and your fara'id. And once he starts tampering with those, then the next step is your iman. These are the words of Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahmatullahi alayhi. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring in our hearts the reverence for all things that are indicative of this deen, all things that are symbolic of the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah azza wa jal bring that word, that meaning that He has used, عَظِّمْ وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ. May Allah bring this ta'zeem into our hearts and make that ta'zeem a means of preserving our deen and the deen of our future progenies. وَصَلَّى اللَّهُ وَسَلَّمَ وَبَارَكَ عَلَى نَبِيِّنَا مُحَمَّدٍ وَعَلَى آلِهِ وَأَصْحَابِهِ أَجْمَعِينَ.